No.
I don't have it.
Cool. All right, welcome. Plan Stage Weekly, November 10th. I'm not prepared with the agenda yet. Who's got the first point?
So it's me.
Marching.
Hi. So I'm the tech writing lead for 14.5. So just letting you know, and then like if you have anything that needs docs review, send it to me when it's ready for review, no later. Because I'm gonna like clear my schedule closer to the release. Because now also the tech writer is responsible for kind of like publishing the docs for all the releases to the docs site as well. And I haven't done it before, so it might be messy. And off to Gabe.
Thanks, Martin. Want to talk about a slight shift in the implementation rollout strategy for work items. We've learned a lot, I guess, in the last few months as a stage and as product group teams, and also kind of wrestling with temporary headcount reset. I felt like we started picking momentum on work items, and then a couple days later, we had a bunch of engineers who were kind of asked to go work on workspaces. I think we all understand why, and that's globally optimal. But net is that it's hard to iterate on the original roadmap, and also it's hard. We found to sort of like just have this shared initiative without clear boundaries and clear DRIs for who's driving which part. So long and short, within product at least, and I think we've talked to the engineering managers already, wanted to loop in the rest of the team and just kind of FYI, open it up for discussion. We still want to reach the eventual goal of work items, so that's not changing. I think just the order of operations is a little bit, and what we're going to do is push feature sort of as a later thing to happen once we get some other foundational stuff in place. And then kind of shift to doing tasks first as a child of type issue. And in terms of like clear, I guess, swim lanes or whatever for the different teams, product planning continues to own the relationships, parenting, all that good stuff. Project management will own the new work item issue detail view and iterating on that. I think Kristen is going to be working on a new settings view for work items where you can view the hierarchy of your work items and all that good stuff. So that's just an FYI. There's a lot more. Let me see if I can link into it. And we sort of refactored the kind of pair epic to kind of show some of the high level critical paths. I'll put it down under 0.3 here, or actually, put it under our paths will eventually converge. And product planning can own their own critical path. Project management can own their own critical path, and then certified can own their own critical path to eventually merge on the vision that we've always had for work items. So what this practically means is we're going to figure out how to get parenting within current issues. So there can be maybe like a task on an issue. There's a couple different ways that we're exploring creating tasks. Kristen and Alexis designed this really awesome kind of new parenting widget that they're exploring that we could drop into the legacy issue UI. They're also exploring maybe dropping in the existing Epic kind of tree type thing to serve in that capacity. It's totally up to them how they want to move forward. And then the goal is to open up a child task on an issue within a modal on the issue detail view, so we can slowly iterate on the new work item detail. So the stuff what we've already done for a feature, most of it, I think, hopefully can be reused, like the title, description. We still like have the same iteration path there. We're sort of switching the type of work item that we're going to iterate on. So that way we don't get to this point where we roll out a massive new work item detail view that hasn't been performance tested or kind of put through the paces. So I just wanted to open that up. If there's any conversations, if Kristen wants to add more context, she's welcome to do that. But it's sort of just an FYI slash if there's questions, let's discuss.
Yeah, thanks for the extra little bit of context about like why it's important to split in this way. I mentioned in the agenda like that from a backend engineering perspective, like it's perhaps not so desirable to split duties this way. Like I would want to make sure that as we implement new work items, that there's collaboration going on, that both teams are fully aware of what the other team is working on and so on. And so I'll need to perhaps have another touch point with Jake and Donald for that. Yeah, and just one other thing, I didn't mention the agenda, but I'll fill it in afterwards. I think we need to be absolutely crystal clear about what each group will be responsible for. It's becoming clearer, but it's still hard for me to understand how to assign engineers to this and ask them to get involved early when I'm still not quite sure about what each team will handle. So I presume it will become more clear over 14.6, but the sooner the better, really.
And I think I had the next point. I highly encourage collaboration amongst the teams, especially in engineering. We're not saying don't collaborate. We're just sort of saying we're kind of splitting this up so that we give each thing proper attention, and sort of also removing dependencies between the teams. So Kristen can work on her vision for parenting and like hierarchies, and I can work on the new work item detail view without sort of cobbling all these things up and coupling them into one big thing that has a bunch of dependencies that can't ship until all of those are satisfied. So it definitely lets us be more incremental and iterative and a little bit more autonomous, but I don't take any of this to say like engineers shouldn't collaborate. Like, please do, or else we'll end up with this like weird Frankenstein thing, which we want to avoid. I don't know, Kristen, you were about to type something. Do you want to talk about the kind of bringing some clarity to the DRIs for the different things, and we can sort through that on the call, or do we want to do that async?
You can also just encourage collaboration amongst especially engineers and design. I think one of the things that we're missing though right now is more collaboration between design and engineering, and like just as a team, because of the way these calls are structured, and because we don't have as much group level discussions about these things. I think we may actually get better output and collaboration as a team if we move to these smaller groups and have a smaller footprint that we're responsible for every roadmap. But I do agree we have to get really clear on what we need to deliver, what each team has, where the crossover points are, because there's still going to be them. And then really double down in our groups to work with each other, use things like the design management feature to bring the engineering team in really soon on the designs, as soon as they go up, and have really close collaboration on what we're delivering to our end, the end users, our customers. I think ultimately, like, one of the things in Plan that's been difficult for me, because it's very different from Create, the way we track at the stage level, there's a lot here and it's very broad. And I sometimes just kind of get overwhelmed, even on calls like this, to like think about it from the whole stage level. And I forget my customers when that happens. So like really what we should be doing in the product planning group is we're really focused on portfolio managers. We have designers as end users. We have different jobs to be done than the project management team. And I think we should really be thinking through those really high level needs for who we're building for. And that's harder to do at the stage level because we actually have different goals that we're going after and different jobs to be done we have to satisfy. So I think it will be a really positive thing once we sort of figure it all out and how the mechanics will work. And I'm actually excited to move forward and try to have a little more direct responsibility as a PM as well to my customers and with the group that we're in, but still contribute back at the stage level so that we have these conversations and that we still retain a good level of communication between the whole stage. So that's sort of just off the top of my head how I'm feeling about this. I think it's actually really exciting to kind of separate these pieces out and really let everyone have more communication as well about how they feel about that too, and just what we're building and why, essentially. I think Donald, you have a comment underneath.
Yeah. So the thing that stood out most around what you said was the collaboration between engineering and UX. And I'm interested to hear if anyone has ideas on how we can improve that.
So I've seen it in smaller group meetings, like go really, like the ones we had in Create, it was a much smaller team because you're all implementing on the roadmap. So there was just like tons of back and forth between especially front end in design, but also back end. Also, another thing I've noticed is because we have so many channels, even me, like when I like scroll through, I'll notice something I missed in like an FE channel. Whereas like in my last team, everything went through the group channel. So everyone was aware of our, like, if there was a design question, if there was a backend question, front end, like the whole team knew. You didn't have to kind of piecemeal it through all different channels. So I think the collaboration could also simplify if it was in one spot and everybody contributed in the same way in terms of how they asked those types of questions to the team. Or it could reduce even to a few spots instead of like, there's a lot, like 3 or 4. And then similarly, like just having a more direct group calls where you're discussing your customers and like open forum for sync design questions, sync between the whole team, and they wouldn't be mandatory and they'd be recorded, but just allowing more of that overlap to happen in a sync way.
Yeah, I put some of the things Kristen said as well, but yeah, just making sure we're aligned on requirements, I think is number one. Making sure we understand what we're building so we could have good conversations about it. And like you said, Kristen, not just what we're building, why we're building it, who we're building it for, just to make sure we are discussing kind of like things effectively. And then also from a tactical perspective, like Kristen said, you make use of things like design management, make sure we're collaborating intentionally, which I think, we're usually good about, but making sure we're being inclusive and doing these things in an async way as well, capturing feedback in a consolidated way as well. I need coffee. But yeah, if that makes sense. Oh, and to John's point, I don't think y'all are intentional. I don't know. I love collaborating with y'all. So nothing from me in that perspective. And take it away, John, if you want to.
I'd like to
My
also.
point is, sorry, go on, Holly.
No, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to clarify that point. Like, it's not that people wouldn't collaborate or wouldn't want to collaborate. I think quite the opposite. It's just that like we're addressing this by splitting further our planning and design between 2 groups. And so we have to be more proactive in seeking out to collaborate. For example, if we were to design something completely in isolation on product planning, not knowing that a decision had been made in project management that affected it. That kind of split brain thing is what I'm worried about. So we'll actually need to take more effort on the engineering side to ensure that information is flowing properly, efficiently, that it's readily available for other engineers, like in the other group.
Yeah, I'd like to also just add that, and I don't want to speak for Alexis, but I feel confident in saying that neither one of us would also not like intentionally collaborate. So if there is anything that you all are missing from us, please let us know. I think that for me, one of the challenges has been, we've been working on so many big ideas that it's a little harder for me to get all the questions answered that I need to get answered async, because oftentimes my questions will spur more conversation, which spurs more questions. And before we know it, we've got these threads that are just massive of content. And then separately, I've got a folder of bookmarks related to work items that probably has like 30 different issues and epics in it. So having a true single source of truth that is the like place to go to know where the things are changing and what might be happening in relation to the product or project is helpful. Now that we're splitting, I feel like the design deliverables that are expected of me are much smaller. And so that feels a lot easier for me to just digest and to be able to quickly communicate information about, as opposed to really, really big ideas where I know that I need to do a lot of research, market research, evaluate pajamas. There are so many things that I need to just do before I feel like I can even pull in an engineer. And then I've got technical questions about constraints as well, which is when I usually do bring engineers in. So if there's something you need, I summarize to say from me for sure, please don't hesitate to ask, and I will try to over communicate and share anything that I've got going on just in case that would be helpful. And if it's not, then feel free to ignore it.
I think Chad raised his hand. Him raised his hand.
Yeah, thanks. I've been trying that on our team to help minimize interruptions. Just jumped in here because I saw y'all had a meeting. One thought is, what if you had something like UX has, where they have those periodic UX showcases? Each individual team, you could periodically have a meeting and show off, like, here's what we've been working on, and that will help minimize those feedback loops of knowing what the other teams are working on and how it might impact you.
I think that's kind of what the work items weekly was intentionally
Okay.
at some point, but I think the conversation for me was still so big that there often weren't designs to show because I still had so many big questions that I needed to get answered before I even felt like I could make a decision, and certainly not backed by data even at that point, but before I could make a decision that would really feel like the right step to go in. So the smaller work is definitely helpful in terms of being able to share.
Or intentionally focused on completed stuff, like what's already done.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to Josh. I was just saying that sometimes we share things like that async, and I think it's really helpful just to kind of like, that's something I'm trying to get better about too. Just kind of review what you're working on async periodically and send that out. Go ahead, Chris.
And I just want to mention too, like with the split of this and having different DRIs and different teams, like I fully trust Gabe as the ultimate DRI and Holly as the design to like make these changes and make the decision after taking our input to just move forward and move fast. We can always, especially UI stuff, we can change later if there's an iteration we need to make that works better for product planning and maybe we missed it. So we can always still adjust those things. And the goal would be to move forward faster. I do know with engineering, there are a lot of really, right now, because it's a shared work items architecture thing, things are more permanent and those discussions probably need a little bit more time and overlap. But especially with design, I think both groups can move as fast as they need to deliver.
Yeah, like I said, the smaller the work, the easier and faster it'll be to share and move. When we've got really big ideas with a lot of big decisions to make, like creating the designs for MVC3, as I said in the issue the other day, there are dozens and dozens of things that need to be considered. And I need to talk with the foundations team. I need to evaluate patterns in the product. So that all just takes a ton of time. So the smaller we can get the pieces that we're working on, the faster we can move from a design perspective as well. And I know for me, I feel a lot more confident when I'm working with small pieces because obviously the risk goes up greatly when there are tons of big things that need to be considered for a release. So smaller work, again, super helpful.
Brett, you had a comment?
Yeah, I totally agree. We've definitely been focusing on big pieces and it's hard to make real progress sometimes on that. So small is important. I'm just a little worried that that information's in the decisions and the architectural pieces are not going to flow between the teams, and not because of anybody's fault, just because you put your head down and you work, and that's what happens, and it doesn't get communicated maybe. So I agree with John. We just need to be really careful about that, because we're actually all working on pretty much the same code base, and fairly complex code. So.
Yeah, I was just going to echo. I agree with that. And I've found personally, I haven't been involved in a ton of the topics, some of them, but the engineering technical discussion issues where we use Discoto and we use the topics and things like that, I would love to have those continue, because it is a great place to capture those sort of big architecture decisions. And I also think we should continue to leverage like blueprints, like architecture blueprints and things like that as a canonical source of truth for decisions that have been made. Just because it's a living document, and it also enables any team, not just here, but eventually, like, we want teams to be able to self-service creating their own widgets, right, in a way that works in the way that we've architected them to work, so that it fits in nicely with kind of how we've approached things technically. And so I would encourage engineers to continue the discussions, and then also capture the outcomes, not just in the threads, but also in like architecture blueprints for how we're architecting things, so that people can come behind us and contribute, and not like recreate the wheel and have the same discussions over again. So maybe that could work.
Eugenia, you had a point. Want to come on in?
Yes, I think it was answered. It's just like I was very confused of what to actually look for, what issue or epic, where the discussion was happening. I was looking at the one with, yeah, I think it was technical discussion. But yeah, I lost track a bit, but I'm just gonna subscribe to that epic and the other one I'm aware of.
There's a chance we'll break the hierarchy widget implementation into a different location. We'll see how it ends up. I haven't really dove in yet, but that should be the place for the full release of work items for sure.
In that case, should we do something with the issue that Alexandra's been the DRI for, and maybe copy that into the design doc, like, because there were a lot of decisions from that, but that's my go-to. Sorry, I'll try and talk more lightly, but like that's the go-to for me for if I want to see where things are.
Yes, and I think that, yeah, we should be having more strategic and focused discussions around actually completing and where we're at with it and the logistics around it and order of priority, which we're having now. It's just a little more all over the place. So I think it will get more specific when we talk about it with just our groups on how we're contributing to it.
Donald, I think maybe your next point.
Donald, your volume's too low.
Hello. Is that better?
You're back.
Yeah, that works.
Okay, sorry about that. So the one nice thing about when we were originally like more intentionally collaborating on work items as a stage was that, like, as we come across dependencies, we just know that that's the work that needs to be done next, regardless of who's going to be working on it. I do have concerns with us splitting in that, especially on the product planning side, we're going to run into a lot of like core architecture blockers that we need to finish on the project management side. So I just want us to be aware that this, like, I know our intent is to go faster this way, but it may end up causing us to go slower in the end.
My feeling is like, I think we'll do our best to avoid dependencies. And I think from my vantage point, we've actually removed a couple unnecessary dependencies. Just if you think about the new work item UI is sort of like a dependency for feature, like, and there's these, and it has to get to like parity with epics in order for us to migrate to epics. There's like a lot of dependencies in the whole thing. But we've actually sort of split them apart. And I think that's what I was trying to capture a little bit with that critical path in the epic, and we should keep that updated over time, is like when there are hard dependencies, let's flag them so they're visible. And I know for me, I was already planning on prioritizing all the things that we would need to eventually have feature, right? From like what we implement in the new work item detail view and things like that. So as long as we flag them, I'm happy to prioritize dependencies first. I think it aligns with our values of more or less efficiency and helping unblock other people to get their work done. So I have no problem with that. And I think it might just take a little bit extra communication here and there, but it doesn't need to be, I don't think there needs to be a worry that we're not going to prioritize dependencies, if that makes sense, because we still have the same eventual outcome that we're working towards, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so I don't think that's so much the problem, because we take that approach now, like when other teams are blocked by things that we want to accomplish, but we still need to do that work, and if it's going to take, like, theoretically it should take us twice as long to get some of the blocking work done, because we're working on it within a smaller team for just project management side. Like, is that okay? Or are those places where we should pull in other team members, like people from product planning, to help clear those blockers?
I'll leave it to Kristen. I think we should just discuss it on a case-by-case basis, and like call them out and identify them and discuss how you want to handle them. So I'm open to also sharing engineers from project management with product planning if there are things. So let's just discuss it and make a decision each time.
Yeah, I'm agreed with that as well, case by case. And if there's something imminent right now within the next 3 releases, let's definitely talk about that as soon as possible. An example block for me as a PM, Gabe's got enabling tracking on the whole work item object, right? So if that doesn't happen, and we may have to go forward and build a bit of tracking into the hierarchy piece, but not get the whole thing and wait on that. But that's okay. We could also contribute capacity to help with that if it's important enough to our goals and and what we're trying to build. So just, it will be a point of discussion and like figuring those parts out where we do have shared interest and shared goals.
Cool. We're halfway through and we have a bunch of stuff in the agenda. Do y'all want to move on to the next point?
Yeah, sorry, I just lost the agenda for whatever reason. I think the next thing is basically can be read only, but we're splitting out release planning issues as well. And so I created one for project management. If you're on the project management team, please hop in and discuss that and help us refine it, break down, bring ideas or things that you feel like we need to prioritize. I need to finalize that more or less by the end of the week, if possible. So that's that. I also pushed up a team handbook page for project management, and eventually we're going to deprecate the global plan page. I think that's something that was going to happen. If you have questions, comment on the MR. I think I merged it, but we can still have discussions there. And then we can go on to number 3, Holly. Read only, never mind. 4, Natalia, you're up.
Okay, let's have a quick demo on the current progress of creating a feature. It was feature at this point, so I'm sorry that's not a task. So I've added a little button just for demo purposes, as you can see from our view work item page. Currently, we're using view router, so this immediately brings us to this super small page where we can add a title. Currently, this is just an input field. I believe the next demo will be Kushal discussing should we have an input field or content editable here, but currently it's just an input field with a focus. And we can add whatever title we have. And on create click on real life application, we will have a small loading time, probably with a little loader on create button, which is sending the invitation to the backend, having the result, and then redirecting us to the next page. Currently, this will happen super fast like this, because I'm only writing down the invitation to the local cache. And anyway, the navigation will be as fast as here. The only waiting time will be just for the response from the backend. And of course, all the navigation is here, so it's still fast. And if I want to cancel something, this just brings us back to the previous page. So basically, this is it. Currently, we're not adding description or something else for the sake of iteration. And I requested a backend review on the schema we have added for the invitation. So any input from the Jean Heinrich Alexandru would be very welcome before we move forward with this schema right now. Thank you. Super small demo, and on to Kushal.
Yeah, so I could have demoed it, but I'm struggling with GDK apparently since half a day now. So I'll just leave a link to discussion. So here's the thing, with create feature title, we are exploring 2 options. We basically wanted to give inline editing experience where a user can click anywhere within the title string and it will become editable, and user can just type in the title text. User would click outside the text and it would be saved, or user can just hit return key and it would be saved. One way to do it would be to use content editable. So we'll basically leverage an HTML feature where any element can become editable by user. Another alternative, which Natalia already demoed, is to use traditional input field. There are pros and cons with both the approaches, and we need to arrive at one approach. I'm going for content editable unless there are obvious caveats that we want to avoid and stick to input. One limitation that I found with input was that if we want to have title spanning more than two lines or one line essentially, then hitting return key would basically put user to the next line. But at the same time, we are thinking of allowing user to save the title by hitting return key. So do we want to support any other key combination, like maybe shift plus return to allow user to put title text into the next line? Or do we want to basically allow user to have n number of words within the title and it would automatically wrap into the next line? So there are a bunch of interesting comments discussing both the possible approaches. It is more of a technical discussion. So UX designers can chime in their thoughts on which approach we should go with. And that's about that. And yeah, next is Kirsten, product planning.
I would have, sorry. I didn't see this. I was up last night. I didn't see it on the agenda, so I'll get this for next week.
Cool. You can kind of look at this, just a high level stuff for kind of PI updates. I'm going to link in, I'll drop in a link to the plan channel whenever I do the formal PI update MR for this month. Project management, good month-over-month improvement of 4% for our unique users that are using plan objects. Continued up to the right trend in terms of iteration adoption. I think I also looked up Epic adoption too. It's trending up to the right as well. So we're getting a good uptick, and there's good evidence that the investments we've been making are worthwhile and that users are using them. If you want to look at more, there's that kind of link that I put in that has all the breakdown of all the interactions across issues and epics, as well as some like high level metrics there, which is pretty great. So you can kind of check that out. Questions about that for B? Okay, cool. This is just a discussion. You can add things here async later if you want, because I'm working on revamping the team planning and planning analytics category direction pages, as well as like kind of breaking it apart to putting some content in include, so we can generate a group level direction page, something that our product leadership has asked us to explore doing. So I'm trying to be a good team member in that respect. But I am curious, like I know I've asked this a few times, like do y'all look at the direction pages? I've heard mixed responses, no, never, sometimes, every once in a while. And they're meant for communicating our strategy and vision internally and externally. And so I wanted to understand specifically how to make them better in terms of what content is there, so that it is more meaningful and useful for our team members internally. So first thing, what are some things that y'all like about the current direction pages? What about dislike? Is there anything there that you want to vocalize? Alexis, you're first.
Yeah, I like having the jobs to be done front and center, just like to build that empathy and like understand what problems we're solving and plan in general. And then also like the category direction is really important to me, just because as some of the leadership consumes this, like that's how they set some of our OKRs in UX. So having that as the single source of truth is really helpful. If that makes sense. Holly, what do you think?
I echo all of that. I completely agree. And having the jobs to be done may be enough to not necessarily have to always put a problem statement, and that can be something we can collaborate on together as well. But having a clear understanding of the problem that we're trying to solve, and then also if we have any data, even if it's just other issues, I know Gabe, you and I talked about this yesterday, but even if it's just existing issues that show users expressing some sort of challenge or opportunity related to what we're trying to address, that's helpful. One of the most common questions I'm getting, because we are introducing a lot of new design patterns, is what data do you have to back this decision? And it's like, well, we're trying to do something innovative and we're trying to keep up with the competition, and there are some things, but having any data available in terms of validating that problem and kind of the like reasons and why behind we're actually doing what we're doing is very helpful for me to make proper decisions moving forward with the UX.
Cool, thanks. Chris?
One of the things that changed recently is that we did merge categories. So epics and roadmaps merged into portfolio management. And so I've been thinking about how to almost track my own maturity level for those individual features and where I think they are now that we've kind of lost that granularity of where they were in terms of their maturity cycle. So I don't think that the direction page necessarily would take up a lot of space, but maybe having a really short, even bulleted list of features that you cover that map to feature tags in the backlog, and some kind of, it could be even like an internal scale of where that feature is at, or how, because if we're saying it's minimal, we think we could take it a lot further. And that's will sort of be lost in the main jobs to be done.
That's a good point. We also need to break up the jobs we've done and map them to categories. We kind of held off on doing that until we cleaned up the categories a little bit. So it may be a good opportunity to tackle this kind of at the same time. That's a good call out. I guess this is for product design and engineering. I guess, do the direction pages as they stand help you understand our working vision and strategy from a product standpoint? And if not, why not? So any thoughts there?
I didn't type this, but I would say that I don't regularly look at it, which I should. I'll admit that I should more. I would say that most of the time when I'm looking at a direction page, it's when I'm trying to track down who is responsible for something that I'm trying to, rundown. So I would say like it's not a thing I visit regularly, and I'm happy to say that I should more, or I should be like intimately familiar with what's on that page.
Don't need to apologize. That's why I'm asking these questions, because if you don't look at them, I want to know why. And like, if it's just, that's the next question, but it's sort of the thing of, if it's not valuable to y'all, it's sort of, I get graded now for my job performance at GitLab on how frequently I update my direction pages. And I've long argued that I don't know how valuable they are to internal team members. I don't know how valuable they are to externally. We're tracking views so I can see how many views they get a month, but I'm trying to, if I'm going to be asked to do this as part of my job and measured basically on my performance of how often I do it, I want to make sure that what updates I do put in there are valuable for both our team, and more or less like get you all to adopt it is my challenge that I'm trying to explore. So I'm sort of like PMing internally our team to make them better. Alexis, I think you were next.
Yeah, I'm just making a note that like sometimes things will be out of date. I mean, I know that's why we're kind of overhauling, but you know, like maybe it'll be something Keenan wrote, for example, or even like, I don't know, maybe saw Victor floating around at some point. And I'm assuming it's a lot of overhead to manage. So I'm wondering if like some portions, probably not all, could be like more of like blogs or videos, or I don't know, maybe there's another way to think about this to make it less overhead for y'all to manage, like all of it. Not a solution, just some ideas. What about you, Kristen?
Yeah, I still have old content in mind from the former PMs, and now that we've merged it together, like my goal is to make it more consumable. One of the outputs of these pages is the executive team does scan them, and there's like actually an e-group meeting once a year where all they do is they sit for hours and they just go through everyone's direction. And so having them be consistent, scannable, more bullets, I think it's really, considering that audience and other people who just show up and need to like grok it really quickly. So I'm going to be moving mine to a more TLDR format as much as I can, where it's a little more scannable and have more detail as needed, or link out to other pages that explain concepts. Mine feels like it has a lot of jargon in it currently, and I just need to make sure I understand all of that as well, and that it does align to where we want to go and what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, to follow on with that, I think the certified ones are even different because I just recently went through the exercise of merging them all into one page for certified. This was sort of an exercise that was presented by directors and product saying, hey, give it a try, see how it looks. Any feedback on that's great. I think we're all, as product teams, trying to understand the best way. I really like Gabe had an idea of how to sort of break the pages down and then have them roll up into one. And I think that's a fantastic, approach. But I think the idea is we're trying to really work hard to make them consumable and useful, because again, if we're graded on this, I actually want to understand who the consumer is and what they're getting from it, because it's very hard to cater it to the right audience right now. It feels like it's basically they're being updated for executives sometimes because they're the ones that seem to care the most about them being updated. But I'd like to change that. I mean, I'd like them to be a working, living document that helps more than just them. So if there's any suggestions there on the single page, I think there's a feedback issue out there I can try to find.
Yeah, and this can be something that we talk about at the group level as well, more around especially the jobs to be done that Alexis was mentioning. If we achieve those things and we have goals and we're hitting them and we're talking about whether we're really serving our customers, we'll do right by our users and we'll feel more empowered as a team to serve them. And hopefully we'll also be able, with each direction page and with aligning as a team and going after it, we'll also be able to get more investment as a team in terms of like how we can add to our team, grow teams, split teams, like keep getting the fruits of our labor, I guess, could be like aligned against what's in the direction pages. So we just want to make sure that we all kind of look at that and like talk about it and have it be a part of the discussion.
Cool. Last talking point on this, we can skip point 4 if you have stuff facing at it, please. But do you even look at them regularly? If not, why not? Is one of my questions. And Brett, you're first.
I admit I don't look at them regularly. And kind of as an engineer, I'm looking more at the issue level. You know, I'm taking direction from you guys and what issues and epics you're creating and all that kind of stuff. But I do look at it once in a while. And I think it's good to have the overall direction view.
Yeah, similar from my side. Like I have this kind of waning trust in the handbook as a single source of truth on the plan side. And I've been trying to address that on the engineering side by like taking the attitude that something isn't like, it hasn't happened until it's in the handbook. So we might discuss like, we're going to change how we apply weights every month, but like the discussion might happen, but if it's not in our team page, it hasn't happened. Like the decision hasn't been made. And it's not to target the direction pages like specifically, it's just more general in the handbook. Like we've changed a lot. The last few weeks, I've seen a few different roadmaps for where we're going with work items and how we're going to do it. And I think that like, I don't feel like I can really put a lot of faith in any of them until they're in black and white in the handbook, right? Like somebody's taken the time to update that handbook page and made a commitment to it. Yeah, so there are parts of the direction pages that if I look at, they seem to me out of date. I don't want to pick out particular ones, but like, no, you know, we're saying things like about, you know, service desk that we're not going to do, like at least not according to how we see a service desk, for example. And that's just one example. Like, but if I look at the service desk direction page, I think there's information there about private comments and stuff. I mean, we haven't worked on that in a long time. It's been community driven solely. So yeah, it's a general attitude that I take towards the handbook. It's a feeling that I have towards it. I feel like maybe a couple of years ago, it was very much more like, if it's not in the handbook, it's not final. And it'd be nice to get back to that.
Great feedback.
Yeah, I feel like a broken record, but like I agree on that as well. There's certain parts of product planning, not in the portfolio management category we should talk through, but the plan stage calls, I don't think makes sense. I think it should be at the group level for those because they're really team focused. But I think it's a really good call out that we need to have that regular review and at least codifying things in the handbook where needed.
Yeah, and just to clarify, that's not to blame anybody or pick out service desk specifically. It just happened to be service desk I was thinking of because we had a call about it late last night. But it's just a more general feeling about the handbook, to be honest.
The only thing that doesn't change is that there'll be more change as well with the roadmap. So like if the single source of truth is going to have to be the issues for what we're actually doing in the epics, but agreed, especially process or team changes, things like that should be in the handbook.
Cool. Thanks, y'all. I really appreciate the input and feedback and discussion there. I think we have a couple of minutes if we wanted to go to Kishal, if you want to facilitate that discussion or if you want to make an async your call.
Yeah, so I'll just leave a link to Slack discussion there. So this was brought up earlier today where in the roadmap, when you expand any parent epic, which has further children epics, then the top level epics on the roadmap follow the sort order that user has selected, be it start or due date, but the children epics do not. And instead they show up in the same order as they were added in the epic page where you add related issues and epics to an existing epic. So it's just a UX/product question, like, do we want those to follow the same sorting order as they do on the top level epics, or do we want to leave them as it is?
I'll follow up in Slack. But I would say test our embedded roadmap view on epics, make sure they're doing the same thing. I'm sure you already checked that, but I do think it should go by date. And if we already have manual sorting on the embedded roadmap, maybe we could look at using that, the sort order sorting. But ideally where we're going is that with any of these views, you'd be able to set a sort order or a type of sorting at the source and give people more flexibility in how they use that, and it would be consistent across GitLab. In the meantime, though, let's make sure it's consistent. So if it is just by date, let's make sure both views are doing the same thing, and we know we'll just leave it as date and we can add on the manual later.
I'll just say that I think the sorting should be consistent with the parent sorting. So if the parent sorting is manual, then the children should adhere to the manual as well. You don't want to be, when I look at something, I want to know that the same rules apply to the information I'm looking at. So I think it's a usability.
Most Gantt tools, you do manually sort the sort order of the columns, but you can turn on a feature where it will kind of sort them by date, and it's like things get jumbled around.
Yeah, more control over it makes sense. But if in a default situation, I would as a user expect whatever's underneath to be sorted in a similar fashion as what's above it. That's just my opinion.
Cool. I think we are at time. Sorry that we didn't have social stuff, but there's a lot of things to discuss today. And I appreciate everyone being open and transparent and honest and empathetic with each other and kind. It was cool to see and have some great discussions around process changes and other things today. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.